5% de la gente que empieza a operar en small caps acaba con la cuenta cero en menos de 3 meses. Eso es la estadística.
What if I told you that a man who lived over 500 years ago, a man known as history's most ruthless political strategist, secretly decoded what women truly desire in a man? Not what they say they want, not what modern dating gurus preach, but what they are biologically, psychologically, and emotionally wired to respond to. Niccolo Machiavelli, statesman, philosopher, and according to many historians, the most brutally honest thinker who ever lived. He wrote about power, manipulation, and human nature with a cold surgical precision that made kings tremble. But buried within his writings, especially The Prince and his lesser-known discourses, are observations about women, desire and attraction that most people never talk about. Stay with me, because what you're about to learn will permanently change the way you understand attraction, relationships, and yourself. Welcome back, or if this is your first time here, welcome. This channel is dedicated to one thing: understanding the hidden psychology behind human behavior. And today, we're going into deep water. We're not here to bash anyone, attack any gender, or promote toxic ideologies. We're here to study human psychology the way a scientist studies the natural world without flinching, without sugarcoating, and without apology. Before we dive in, smash that like button and subscribe if you want to understand the psychological patterns that most people never even notice. Let's go. Section 1. Who was Machiavelli really? Most people hear the name Machiavelli and immediately think evil, manipulative. The guy who said the ends justify the means. But that's a shallow reading of a deeply complex man. Niccolo Machiavelli was born in Florence in 1469. He served as a diplomat, a military strategist, and a close advisor to some of the most powerful rulers in Europe. He watched empires rise and fall. He saw love, betrayal, ambition, and weakness up close, not in books, but in the courts of kings and the bedrooms of nobles. When he was stripped of power and exiled, he did what all great thinkers do: he wrote. He dissected human behavior the way a surgeon dissects a body, looking for the truth beneath the surface. And what he found was that humans, men and women alike, are not primarily driven by reason. They are driven by desire, fear, and the desperate need for status and security. Here's the crucial thing to understand: Machiavelli didn't moralize. He didn't tell people what they should want. He told them what people actually want. And that is where his dark genius lies. So what did he observe about women? Let's break it down, and I want to be clear. These aren't personal opinions. These are psychological patterns rooted in evolutionary biology, social dynamics, and centuries of human behavior that modern science is only now beginning to confirm. Section 2. The first secret women are drawn to Fortuna, not safety. In The Prince, Machiavelli personifies fortune or to confirm. Section 2. The first secret women are drawn to Fortuna, not safety. In The Prince, Machiavelli personifies fortune or Fortuna as a woman. And he makes a bold, controversial claim: fortune favors the bold. She is more easily won by the man who takes risks, who acts with force and energy, than by the man who proceeds cautiously. Now, before you dismiss this as old-fashioned, hear me out, because modern psychology backs this up in a fascinating way. Studies in evolutionary psychology consistently find that women, particularly at certain hormonal phases, are more attracted to men who display what researchers call high-variance behaviors: risk-taking, confidence, decisive action. Not recklessness, but the kind of bold, directed energy that signals competence and strength. Why? Because throughout human evolutionary history, a man who played it safe was often a man who couldn't protect or provide. The man who took calculated risks, the hunter who went after the bigger prey, the leader who made the hard call, was the man who had real capability. Machiavelli understood this intuitively. He wrote that fortune shows her power where valor has not been put to resist her. In plain terms, where there's no strong man, chaos wins. And chaos is deeply unattractive. The psychological takeaway: women are not primarily attracted to comfort. They're attracted to competence. A man who has built something, who has overcome something, who carries himself like someone who has faced fear, and that man triggers ancient A's, primal circuits in the female brain that no amount of niceness can replicate. Section 3. The second secret. The power of controlled unpredictability. Here's where Machiavelli gets uncomfortably specific. He observed that predictable men who are completely transparent, completely available, completely known, lose power. Not just political power, personal power. He wrote about the importance of strategic ambiguity. A prince who is too easily read is a prince who is too easily manipulated. And this principle applies, whether we like it or not, to romantic and social dynamics as well. Psychologists call this the intermittent reinforcement effect. When reward is unpredictable, when you can't quite figure someone out, the brain's dopamine system goes into overdrive. It becomes obsessed with solving the puzzle. This is why many people find themselves more emotionally attached to someone who keeps them slightly off balance than to someone who is perfectly consistent and available. It's not rational, it's neurological. Now, here's the important nuance, and I want to be very clear about this. Machiavelli was not advocating for cruelty, manipulation, or emotional games. He was describing a psychological reality. There's a massive difference between authentic mystery, the natural unpredictability of a man who is genuinely pursuing his own vision and values, and manufactured hot and cold behavior designed to control someone. The man who is naturally unpredictable because he's genuinely focused on his mission, his goals, his growth, that man is attractive because he's real. The man who fakes it to manipulate is the man Machiavelli would have called weak, because he has no internal substance, only strategy. Section 4. The third secret: women respond to virtue. This is probably the most misunderstood concept in all of Machiavelli's writings, and it's the one that's most directly relevant to attraction psychology. Machiavelli used the Italian word virtù, which does not mean virtue in the modern sense. It doesn't mean being polite, kind, or morally good. Virtù means excellence of character, force of will, the capacity to shape one's environment and destiny through decisive, skillful action. A man of virtù walks into a room and changes its energy. He doesn't ask for permission to exist. He doesn't shrink in the presence of others. He doesn't need external validation because his sense of self comes from within. And here's where it gets psychologically fascinating. Research on female mate preference consistently finds that self-assurance, social dominance, and what psychologists call internal locus of control, the belief that you control your own life rather than being a victim of circumstance, are among the most powerful attraction triggers. This is the difference between the nice guy who is endlessly agreeable, who gives hoping it will be appreciated, and who ultimately gets taken for granted, and the man who is genuinely kind but operates from a place of strength and self-possession. Machiavelli would say, a man who needs to be liked has already lost. The man who genuinely doesn't need approval, who would rather be respected than liked, paradoxically becomes the man most people want to be around. Section 5. The fourth secret: desire follows scarcity. Machiavelli was a master of resource dynamics. He understood that value is never absolute, it's always relative. And this principle maps directly onto romantic psychology. The man who is everywhere, always available, always responsive, always eager, that man trains the people around him to see him as abundant, common, freely accessible. And what is freely accessible is rarely deeply valued. Economists call it scarcity principle. Psychologists call it reactance theory. The idea that when access to something is limited or threatened, its perceived value skyrockets. And in human relationships, this plays out in ways we often don't consciously recognize. Have you ever noticed that the people who seem the most desirable are often the ones who seem the least available, who have rich, full lives of their own, who don't rearrange their entire existence around one person? This isn't a game. It's not manipulation, simply the psychology of value. A man who has a mission, hobbies, friendships, ambitions, and a sense of direction, that man is genuinely scarce. Not because he's performing scarcity, but because his time and attention are genuinely directed toward something real. Machiavelli wrote about the importance of maintaining one's own power base before extending resources outward. Applied to relationships, invest in yourself first. Become someone with real substance. The attraction that follows will be genuine, not manufactured. Section 6. The fifth secret emotion, not logic, is the real currency. Here is perhaps Machiavelli's most enduring insight, and the one that modern neuroscience validates most strongly. People, all people, make decisions emotionally and justify them logically. He wrote that the prince must know how to use the beast, the emotional, instinctual side of human nature, alongside reason. The man who appeals only to logic will always lose to the man who knows how to stir feeling. Neuroscientist Antonio Damasio's landmark research showed that people with damage to the emotional centers of their brain, even with intact logic and memory, are completely unable to make decisions. Because decisions are emotional, always. What does this mean for attraction? It means that a woman does not fall for a man because his resume is impressive. She falls for the way he makes her feel, the emotional atmosphere he creates, the sense of safety combined with excitement, what psychologists call the activation response that he triggers in her presence. A man can have every external quality, looks, money, status, and fail completely if he doesn't understand emotional dynamics. And a man with fewer external advantages can be extraordinarily compelling if he moves through the world with presence, warmth, and genuine confidence. Machiavelli would say, learn to speak the language of emotion, not to manipulate, but to truly connect, because connection is the whole game. Section 7. The synthesis. What it all means for you. So let's pull this all together. What is Machiavelli's dark secret about what women really want? It's not money, it's not looks, it's not charm, though charm helps. It's this. Women, like all human beings, are drawn to genuine power. Not power over others, but power over the self. The power that comes from knowing who you are, what you want, and moving toward it with courage and clarity. Machiavelli's genius was seeing that most men, most people, are driven by fear. Fear of rejection, fear of failure, fear of being seen. And that fear makes them shrink, perform, and seek approval. And nothing kills attraction faster than the desperate need for approval. The man who has done the inner work, who has faced his fears, built real skills, developed a real sense of self, and moves through the world from abundance rather than scarcity, that man is not playing games. He is simply being what most people are too afraid to become, fully, unapologetically himself. And that is the most powerful thing in the world. Machiavelli lived 500 years ago, but the human psyche hasn't changed. The patterns he observed, fortitude, mystery, virtuate, scarcity, emotional intelligence, these aren't historical curiosities. They're the invisible architecture of every compelling human being who has ever walked this earth. The question is, are you willing to do the real work, not the surface-level tips and tricks? The actual deep work of becoming someone who operates from genuine strength. If this video gave you a new perspective, hit the like button. It genuinely helps this channel reach more people who are ready to think differently. Subscribe for more deep dives into psychology, human behavior, and the hidden patterns that shape our lives. Drop a comment below. Which of Machiavelli's 5 secrets resonated with you most? I read every single one. Until next time, stay curious, stay grounded, and remember, real power has no need to advertise itself.